What does it mean to be a survival horror game? In fact, hang on, let's start over. When I say the words survival horror, what games come to mind? If you're anything like me, names like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and Amnesia do. But have you ever taken a second to think about what those words really mean? What exactly is survival horror? And do the games that carry this description actually deserve it? Survival is the state of continuing to live or exist, typically in spite of an accident, ordeal, or difficult circumstances. Horror is defined as an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust. When placed in front of the word horror, survival becomes an adjective, something it's never been before. Now we're speaking of an intense feeling of fear, shock, or disgust that you feel would typically be unsurvivable. Perhaps the difficult circumstance you're trying to continue to exist within is horror itself. The first video game ever to refer to itself as survival horror, rather than just straight up and down horror, was 1996's Resident Evil. The game was first conceived by Takeru Fujiwara as a spiritual successor to Sweet Home, an NES game also developed by Fujiwara that released in 1989 and was based off the Japanese horror film of the same name. But it quickly became its own thing as development progressed. Resident Evil has been cited as one of the most influential video games of all time, and for good reason. It's the very first survival horror game, and no other first video game in a given genre has ever defined said genre as thoroughly as it did, in my opinion. The reason it credited itself as survival horror and not just horror was namely due in part to two factors: limited resources and the feeling of isolation. In Resident Evil, every decision you make, every puzzle you solve, every enemy encounter is defined by the items you are currently holding. You have an incredibly limited inventory space. You can pick up and drop off your items in safe rooms, but those only come every so often, and who knows how many zombies you'll run into, or how many of the puzzle pieces you're carrying around will actually find their home in between them. This feeling, mixed with just how few encounters you have with other characters, makes for quite a thrilling horror environment, and one that you could really only achieve in a video game. So, what separates horror from survival horror? I think we can all agree that Minecraft is a survival game and that Layers of Fear is a horror game. But does Resident Evil really do the best job of combining these two games? I don't mean literally, of course, but when you break down these two games to their core mechanics, how many do they really share with that of Resident Evil? Where Resident Evil has limited resources and inventory management, Minecraft has near infinite versions of those. Sure, you have to manage inventory, but your resources are only limited by how willing you are to search further to find them. Where Layers of Fear has jump scares mixed with a horror-filled narrative that eats away at your own ability to continue forward, Resident Evil has less jump scares and more of a very direct horror that in theory is easy to deal with. You know the problem and the solution. And the better you get at identifying that solution, the more your mind focuses on how to achieve said solution, the less scary the game becomes overall, especially on repeat playthroughs. Similar to a horror film, Layers of Fear will be scary every time I play it, but I'll never be as scared by Resident Evil as I was during my first playthrough. So what should a survival horror game look like? I feel like Resident Evil and its many influencees didn't quite nail it, and I feel like it'd be very easy to overcorrect in this situation and conceive a horror survival game, something that looks more like Don't Starve. Allow me to introduce you to The Forest. The Forest truly redefines the genre of survival horror. At the start of the game, you're on a plane with your son. The plane crashes, you survive the crash, you wake up, no son, and really no any other passengers. You immediately notice that you're hungry and thirsty, so you start scavenging for discarded plane food until you come across a stewardess, murdered by a tactical axe. Your new friend and your only resource that will never run out. The objective? Find your son. You notice a plethora of abandoned luggage, so you decide to scavenge through them for anything that can help you. But don't search for too long. Stay in one place for too long and you might run into a native. They look to be human, but are they? They don't seem to speak any language, and it becomes clearer and clearer as you venture onward that they killed all the other passengers. Who's to say they didn't already kill your son? The longer you stay here, the more frequently you run into them, and you feel like you are no closer to locating your son. Do you give up? Assume your son is dead and SOS for a passing plane or boat? But then again, if you did that, you'd miss your opportunity to explore that cave you saw earlier. So, you venture down into the cave. What's the worst thing that could happen? Using your less than perfect lighter to guide you, you make your way slowly through the cave. You locate some other passengers, already dead of course. You take a quick look through their stuff and, oh my god, is that a laptop? Finally! It doesn't have internet, obviously, but it does have a motherboard, the exact component you were missing in order to make that bomb. You hastily throw together a dirty bomb and proceed deeper into the cave. Another rope leading down. You take a deep breath and descend. Your feet touch the bottom, but it's not the rock you've been feeling this whole time. It feels softer than that. You flash your lighter and you're standing on corpses. You hear a noise coming at you. You quickly shine the light to see what it is. A monster. The hell is that thing? It looks like a spider, but made out of humans? How many people were trapped here? Are these all passengers of the plane you were on? Did any survive? Are some of them this thing? Before you get an answer to any of these questions, you hear the sound of your own head hitting stone, and everything turns to black. The next thing you see are words telling you how many days you survived. This is the atmosphere of the forest. It's a survival horror game. The horror you're trying to survive from is only as direct as, I know it could get me, not just when it'll try to get me. And even that is tested. That human spider monster and its two friends also roam outside the caves as well. In place of a limited inventory, you have a limited inventory, but the limitations are much more self-contained. Rather than you can only carry 8 items, it's you can only carry 8 of this item, 20 of this item, and only 1 of this item. Run out of food, you lose. Run out of water, you lose. Get killed? Come to find out you weren't actually killed, only brought to one of those cave systems. Fight your way out, find your way back to your makeshift camp, get killed a second time. This game does a good job of not making the player feel unstoppable, even when you do. I mean, you have 4 rope, which is the max amount of rope you can hold. But what if over the next 2 days you need 5 rope? And the only rope you found in the last day is an hour away from where you are in the direction you just came from, and you need this rope, like, now. And how does it fare in the isolation aspect? Well, how isolated would you feel on a deserted island where the only people might not even be people who don't speak at all, and the only person you need to find might not even be alive? The unknown can be truly terrifying, especially when the unknown is a little recognizable. If it looks like 3 people with their back fused together walking around like a spider, it probably is. Or is it just your mind playing tricks on you? Is any of this real? What are the odds you were the only survivor of a plane crash so severe that you don't even know where the other half of the plane is? When I was playing this game, I kept thinking about 2 things. I need to survive, and I am horrified. And that's when it hit me. This is what true survival horror is. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Amnesia, Parasite Eve, Until Dawn, Outlast. You can call yourself whatever you want, but The Forest is true survival horror in my book. Thank you for watching. And happy Halloween from Thunder and Lightning.